who are we and why are we this way? And I've thought a lot about this as a millennial, talking to a lot of millennials, doing both survey research and focus groups across the country in different topics. I've come to the conclusion that the best way to understand us is, as I said earlier, think about where we come from. And so for most millennials, not all of them, but most millennials, our parents are baby boomers. And so to understand where we're coming from, you really have to understand how we were raised and the environment in which we were raised. And so for all of those boomers in the room who raised your hands before, who have kids, are my age, right? You know us better than you think. You understand why we tick and operate the way we do better than you think. And as I said, if you think we are lazy narcissists who still live at home, well, part of the blame has to be you, right? You have to take some of it. Now, if you think we are this incredibly optimistic, tolerant, progressive generation who won't take no for an answer, pushes the bounds, well, then you can also take a little bit of the credit for that as well, okay? But when you look at the data and you ask how similar actually are millennials with their parents' generation, those baby boomers, you actually find there's a lot of similarities on many things. Certainly differences, which I'll highlight today. But when you ask them, for example, do you want to get married, right? This is not a generation that's rejecting traditional marriage. In fact, 80 to 90% of millennials say, yes, at some point in my life, I want to get married. I'm going to put a ring on my finger, whether it's a homosexual relationship or heterosexual, doesn't matter. I'm going to get married. Now, are they getting married in a church or a synagogue or a temple? Far less likely to do that, right? But we're getting married. Do we want to have children? Overwhelming majority of millennials say yes. At some point in their life, they want to have children. In the same way that our parents said owning is the better option, we believed you, and so we all also want to own a home. Okay? So these three life milestones, getting married, having children, owning a home, are not that different from what many of you in this room wanted to achieve when you were in your mid-20s, let's say. One of the differences, though, with my generation that I think has come to define who we are, though, is that we're achieving so much of this much later in our life. And that has important consequences on the economy, on the workplace, and on so much else in our world. So let me talk a little bit about why we're different. And I start with our upbringing and the infamous helicopter parent. How many of you are helicopter parents? Raise your hands. You will note there were far more boomer parents and Gen Xer parents in the room, and only like 5 of you raised your hands. Far more of you are helicopter parents, even if you don't wish to admit it. I still get the occasional email from a parent, from a student at Carleton, or last summer, Abacus, we were looking to hire a summer student, and I kid you not, I received an email from a parent, a mother, who told me that her son was in Europe, traveling, but that he would love this job, and that I would hope I would consider her. Honestly, I have it, and I was kind, and I responded, and I didn't say what I really thought, but it was a reflection, right, of a shift in how we raised our kids, generally speaking. And there's 3 things that I think are important for us to consider. The first is, I describe millennials as really the first generation that was institutionalized at a very young age. Okay, and what I mean by that is not that we were put into, prison or youth, is that our parents, our moms, still more than our dads, went back to work when we were much younger than previous generations. And so we were always in a formal educational environment from a much earlier stage in our life, right? We had early childhood education, daycare. We were the first generation to have junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten. And as you all know, we were also the generation to go much further, right? Get 1 post-secondary degree, maybe 2, maybe 3. And so think about what that means on how we interact, how we think about the world, and what we want from work in particular. We've always had somebody in our life, whether that be our parents or a teacher or a coach or a guidance counselor, someone giving us feedback, telling us how we were doing, recognizing our efforts, curating our day, right? Giving us a syllabus on at 8 o'clock you'll do this, at 9 o'clock you'll do this, at 10 o'clock you'll do this, right? From a very young age. In contrast, think about Gen X, often referred to as the latchkey kids, right? And what does that mean? At the end of the day, you had a key to the house, you let yourself in, you probably made yourself a snack, and you entertained yourself. Probably went out, met up with friends, and showed up later to have dinner with your family if you did that. Millennials, on the other hand, not only went into these institutionalized formal educational spaces for most of the day, they then went into after-school programs, right? Piano lessons, dance, hockey, soccer, golf, you name it. Whatever you could do, right? Boys and girls clubs, right? Whatever your family could afford, if they could afford anything, you were put into some other kind of program. And so this institutionalization created a generation, I believe, that when you look at every survey about what millennials want out of work, number one is typically they need more feedback. They crave more feedback and recognition. And I think part of that is driven by this environment in which we were raised. Now, the second fact about how we were raised is not only were we constantly surrounded and given direction and told how to do things and given recognition, but the relationship between us and our parents was probably far more equal than previous generations. When I say equal, I mean you saw the elimination of kids' tables and adults' tables. You invited your kids to the adults' table. You asked them what they thought. You cared what they thought, right? There was a far softer relationship, right? Not to say that my grandfather didn't love my dad. No doubt that he did. But that the way that he showed that love, the way that he communicated and talked to his son is very different than the way that my father talked to me when I was growing up and still to this day talks to me, right? The relationships are far better. And you just have to think about this, which appeared in 1981 for the first time. Think about that. What does this sign mean? Sure, I put this in my car and I don't want you to hit me because I have a kid in the car. As if when I don't have a kid, please hit me, right? So boomer parents were so concerned with protecting their kids, right, that they had to start putting signs on things to say kids are around. And it's just a reflection, right, of how protective I think boomers and even Gen Xers today are of their children. It's a reflection of a shift in how we were raised and how parenting was done. Now, beyond simply this protection, this coddling, and this institutionalization, the third part of how we were raised was the emergence of the self-esteem movement, right? And when we survey Canadian millennials aged 18 to 30 a few years ago, we asked them, do you agree or disagree that growing up, many people told you that you could achieve anything you wanted, right? Almost 85% agreed with that statement. So you want to be prime minister, you want to be the astronaut, you want to be an engineer, you want to be a doctor, whatever you want to be, artist, right? Figure skating, professional, hockey player, go out and do it, right? The world is your oyster. Nothing is impossible. You can go out and achieve it, right? You want to get a university education. That should be available to everybody. This was the first generation in which access to university and post-secondary was far more accessible than anyone else. And so we listened to you. We took your encouragement and we said, you're right. Why would I want to do that job when I could do that job, right? And so part of, I think, what we have to understand about my generation is not everybody is delusional to think that they can do anything that they want. But we're the first generation in which we were told, do what you love to do. Make an impact every day. Feel fulfilled at the end of every day. And you are going to live a happier life, right? We're also the generation in which you told us work isn't everything. It doesn't define who you are. And so we listened to you, as you hoped we would. And now you get a generation, I think, who is incredibly optimistic about what they can achieve, but maybe is unrealistically hopeful about what's possible.